And we'll be monitoring the chat too. So if you'd like to ask a question in the chat, you're welcome to do that or unmute. And I'll turn the session over to Tessa.
Thanks, Melissa. This is going to be really formal and casual. So feel free to jump in if you have questions, either, raise your hand or use chat. But Melissa wanted me to start off and just mention a little bit about the book and my experience with Eli Review. And then she'll walk us through some of the assignments that I say we worked on, but really Melissa did most of the work. So I'm very grateful for that. So as some of you know, I took over Winning on Appeal, probably about 5 or 6 years ago after Judge Aldersert passed away. I'd been teaching from the book for many years and loved it, but it was very outdated. So Judge Southwick from the Fifth Circuit and I worked on a new edition that involved a significant reorganization of the book, a survey of judges to update the existing survey. And the result I'm really pleased with, although now with COVID, I feel like I'm due for another update soon. So that's sort of the story behind the book. The book, of course, is from the perspective of judges, judges are your audience when you're doing an appeal. So what do judges want to see in appellate briefs? And the order of the book follows what I would teach a student, the order to write a brief, right? So you kind of build on how you should be looking at the particular issues you're appealing. Last year, I started using Eli Review after hearing all the listserv chatter about it. I had missed, I think Brian Larson and some other folks did some, I think Kate, you might have done some training on it too, I can't remember, but I missed all those trainings. And so one of my colleagues walked me through it, and I think I met with Melissa, who's always so generous with her time. And I sort of stumbled through a year of Eli Review, and I liked it. I thought it was really valuable for my students. Especially, I loved the ability to have them comment anonymously on each other's work. I know you can do some commenting and stuff on LMSs, but it's harder to make it anonymous. It just involves a lot more effort on your part. So at a small school like Arizona, my students know who's at the top of the class and who's at the bottom of the class. And I didn't want the fact that number one student is in my class for number 50 student to think, oh, I have nothing to add to that particular student's writing. I have no feedback to give. So that was a really useful tool. It was also useful for me to see who was and was not doing the work. So I laughed. Sometimes I would get a comment. I would see feedback from one student to another student. You did X. Professor Dysart in the book say not to do X. So maybe you want to look back at that again. And I would laugh at that. I thought, well, at least somebody's reading the book. That's good to know. But I found it to be useful. The hardest thing, though, with the Eli Review, and part of this was just what last year was, is that I was just barely a step ahead of the students. And so it would be like, oh, shoot, I need to be assigning this Eli Review. And I'm in there trying to create the task and trying to think about what I want the students to do. So Melissa reached out to me and said, would you be interested, once she found out I was an author of my textbook, would you be interested in creating some curated assignments that focus on winning on appeal? And I thought, this is great, because then I won't be scrambling throughout the semester to create assignments. I'll have assignments that are like well thought out, well planned, and connected to the textbook that I teach from. I think you could use these assignments and not use Winning on Appeal. It's of course better if you use Winning on Appeal, because it points to specific parts of the book or examples that are in the book. But I'm really looking forward to using these assignments, because I think it'll make my job a lot easier throughout the semester. I won't be creating assignments as we go. So Melissa, do you want to take it over from there?
Sure. And so I'm going to start with just an overview of what Eli Review is. Some of you know Eli well and used Eli last year like Tessa did, but some of you are brand new. So basically, Eli is a course tool to support peer feedback and revision, and it assumes a 5-step process. Students submit a little piece of writing, which we've identified as basically chapter chunks from Winning on Appeal in this course that you're going to see. And then they give feedback in something that looks like a survey. And so we built out all of the criteria into these reviews, and students will do checklists, they'll do a rating, and most importantly, they'll write some comments. All of that feedback will then flow to the class and to the individual writer so that you as the instructor can really quickly get a bird's eye view of where your students are succeeding and where they are struggling. And then in a low stakes way, you can hold students accountable for the feedback they've received by assigning a revision plan, which works like a read receipt. So they get their peer feedback, they can select some comments to add to the plan, it gets copied to this list, they prioritize the list and add some notes. So we're trying to encourage students to go through the whole writing process, even if they stop short of revising the original piece of writing. But we want them to write, give each other feedback according to the criteria, really think about where they stand in terms of meeting those objectives, and then make some notes to themselves about what they need to do later in the semester to bring this portion of the assignment forward. So I promised you 10, and here are 10. I'm going to show it on a slide before I show it in the app so that you can sort of learn how to look at Eli Review. So remember, I just showed you the workflow. The dashboard is organized by color, and that you're looking for blue. Blue is a writing task. So that's where the cycle begins. And the next step in the cycle is a review task. So that's where students give each other feedback. And then the revision plan is that low stakes accountability for using feedback. It's green. So we start with standards of review, issue presented, critical opening paragraph, argument section, statement of facts, procedural history, which I got incredibly wrong. And Tessa fixed it, but it was good for both of us to learn, like, that's the part of the book that as a non-lawyer I couldn't parse. Summary of argument, introduction, jurisdictional statement, and then the revision plan for argument and conclusion. So the other thing I want you to see before I show you the app itself is, you see that little thing that looks like a tilted number 8? That is a link that is only good for students. If you click it, you're going to get an error. But if you click it, it's going to copy that link, and then you drop it in your course management system, Blackboard, D2L, Moodle, whatever crazy thing your school uses. And students, when they click it, their browser will remember their Eli Review login, and they'll go directly to the task. So this dashboard view here that shows you 31 different tasks is not the way students will encounter your Eli Review assignments. They're going to encounter it through this little link. And so you'll build out your modules, or however you assign your course and your course space, you'll drop this little link in, and students will go straight to Eli Review. So let me pull up the course. Sorry, I had it open in a different tab and forgot I needed to do it in this one. And I will walk you through the critical paragraph. So you saw that I signed in at app.elireview.com. I'll ask you to do that in just a minute if you'd like a course copy. And I'm going to pull in the one that says for sharing. So this template course will give you a copy of this course. I'm going to just show you one example today, and then we'll open the floor for questions before we go through the process of the cloning. And you can see that it is arranged by due date, and the first task is at the bottom. So that's a default setting in Eli Review. It's always at the bottom. It's one of the things you're going to have to navigate as you work with this clone, is that the thing that you're going to start with is at the bottom. I'm going to pick critical opening paragraph, and in this system, to view anything, just click on the title of the thing you want to see. So when you click into it, you have the instructions that we have written, and you can change those. So once you have your copy of this course, every word in the course is your word. You can change it to be whatever you want it to be. You can add to, delete, put new links in, etc. You can also click preview. It's the bottom left button. This lets you see what students see. So it switches to a green background, and you can see that everything is the emphasis is on time because of that workflow issue. As students are going to submit a draft, they've got to submit a draft in a way that allows them to get feedback. So we really emphasize due date here, and I'll come back to that in a second. The submission method, we've primarily chosen for students to compose in Eli Review or paste into Eli Review, you'll note that they can import the file. That is intentional. We want students to be able to highlight words and offer comments. And that functionality of being able to highlight in the draft and leave a comment is only possible when students compose, paste, or import the text. There's a couple of assignments that are longer and more polished where we've asked for students to upload files. And in that case, students can add comments, but there won't be highlighting attached to that. So just quick and dirty, we're using the critical opening paragraph. It should be 1 or 2 paragraphs. They're just going to paste their stuff in and then they submit. So let me pause. Any questions for me about overview of writing tasks and how they work, or this particular task?
I just want to jump in and say we created tasks for every section of the brief, except for the tables, because I couldn't think of a way to do that really artfully. But you don't have to do them all. I'm not doing them all in my class. So you'll get access to the course and you can clone the tasks. I guess we'll still cover this later into the ones that you want, but you don't have to do them all.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't do them all. And Heather asked, will it work if students write in groups? So Heather, yes, but it's complex. So Eli is a reciprocal peer learning environment, which means that every student who is going to give feedback must have also submitted a draft. So if you're using a co-authorship model where Tessa, Stephanie, Tracy, and I were all co-authoring together, we would each submit a copy of the thing we wrote collaboratively into Eli individually. So as long as each co-author submits their own version and you as the instructor put the peer review groups together so that no co-author is partnered with someone in their co-author group, then Eli works well. The thing is that you have to do those mental gymnastics to go, Tessa and Melissa can't be peer reviewers together because they are writers together. So let me go to the review task for this one. Again, I'm going to scroll a minute, sorry. In the review task, you just click on it. We titled everything feedback on and repeated the writing little bit there, critical opening paragraph. And for this one, I'm going to use the student preview because it's just the easiest way to see the assignment. So at the bottom left, you click preview. This is the way if I were going to work through this course, how would you browse through? I would go to the bottom, click preview on the left, look at the student view. It's going to give you the clearest picture of what this assignment is. We put a big, bulky reason for doing peer review on the front of every single task. So if you only use reviews 3, 7, and 10, great. This is what students will see when they come to the front page. And that's because it's really important to tell students why they're being asked to give peer feedback. And we pulled quotes from the book and we pulled some ideas from the research literature about that. So just FYI, this big bulky statement is in every single review. You can change it, but if you take it out, please replace it with something that helps students understand why they're being asked to give each other feedback on peer learning. When I click on a tab here, the preview assumes that I have 2 partners and that the review is named. As the instructor, you can set the reviews to be anonymous, and that will show classmate number instead of name. As Stephanie is pointing out, when students use files, the file from Microsoft Word has metadata in it from Microsoft Word that shows the students' names. So that's another reason why the writing task in this course are set to be compose, paste, import rather than file upload, because we can make sure there's no anonymity breach in this way. But back to the anonymity, it will say classmate number, but the classmate number is not based on alphabet. It's based on group membership in that review. So classmate 13 is a different human every single time. And so that's another way we preserve anonymity. What you see on the right is the trade identification checklist that are aligned to the textbook. And where possible, we say what part of the textbook so that students can go on their own and kind of look those up. So these are words and expectations that are covered in chapter 13. We have the other, we did it in two ways. One is, what should the draft have? And then what are the common problems? And for this particular paragraph, the problems are longer than the shoulds. And so, you can sort of play around with that, but this kind of helps students go, oh, I read about that. Am I seeing that in this draft? And this just helps with that cognitive load. It's really difficult work, as you know, to learn to write a good critical opening paragraph. So this review is acting like a scaffold to reduce the cognitive load so that students can really pay attention to the concepts here. The next thing that we did to try to help mitigate the challenge of giving effective feedback is embed examples. In this particular review, we included a full model. We didn't do that in every single review for lots of reasons, but it's one of the ways that you might customize this course to match your own goals. And we want students to be able to kind of rate, but their tendency is to skew high. And so how do you get students not to skew high? You set a really high bar immediately on screen, not that they have to go look up, but they're just reading it. And then they sort of put that intention with whatever they've submitted. The last piece in this course that you'll see in every single review is that we built out contextual comment prompts that encourage elaboration. So this comes from my colleague, Dr. Bill Hart-Davidson, one of Eli's co-founders, who explains that a helpful comment has to have three parts. It's got to have description, evaluation, and suggestion. And so we use the sample comments to kind of say how that sounds in real people language, not teacher language, right? Which is how they've most often received feedback. So they don't know how to talk to each other like humans because they only know how teachers have talked to them. So normally what you see in a peer review is you'll see a lot of correction. What should happen in this review is you should see correction, but you should also see this kind of personal connection. I'm confused by, are you going to? Going in this direction might help. So we're trying to humanize peer feedback, but also elevate the range of things students are talking about. The final comment is our other big organizing principle for this course. And so when I read the book, well, most of it, let's be honest. When I read the book, one of the things that really stood out to me was that the winning on appeal really encouraged students to think about how the brief is going to be received by the people who are getting it, right? And one of the activities for the critical opening paragraph said, you're going to take this brief and you're going to go talk about in a casual setting. How would you do that? I'm not sure where the bleed through is coming in. So anyway, this particular question says, just prompts them to think about summarizing in that particular one. And we repeat the line, persuasive, focused, and crisp. So those get repeated several times. In another review, I'll just click out and go back to home. You'll see that we use the question, the bottom here. What could the writer do to put the judge in the frame of mind to rule for the client? That's the most repeated question in this review. So we want students to walk out with a habit of mind to always be thinking, what should the writer do to put the judge in the frame of mind to rule for the client? So that's the kind of the key pieces of each review. What should the draft have? What are the common problems? Offer elaborated comments, and then what's a question that puts students in the scenario of a real lawyer at work, trying to be persuasive to those around them. The revision plan is standard. So we wrote this language together, and I appreciate Tessa's help on figuring out the right ways to explain this metacognitive process to legal writers. It's also a technical process, so just keep that in mind. And so we start with the purpose and then explain to students how they're going to select their feedback from the review and then prioritize their feedback and then add a note. And this is where it's another kind of big idea behind Eli Review. When students receive personal feedback on their drafts, that's not all the feedback that's happening. They also learn some things about writing and about their own text by giving other people feedback and by anything you did from the front of the room to model or to explain. They also learn some things from the textbook that probably landed differently after this review. So this additional note space is a way for students to capture that. And it's also a way to help you explain to students that feedback is not just what people tell you. Feedback is everything you can learn from your writing environment, and you're responsible for your learning. So how can you turn on your brain to pay attention to all of these trends and patterns? And so that revision plan just functions like a quick read receipt with a few prompts for reflection, and you can assign them as you go. So let me go back to the.
Can I jump in really quick for a
Please
second,
do.
Melissa? So one thing we did in the revision plan, I don't make my students submit a revised draft because they do that in the final brief. But I noticed that sometimes in the feedback, they would ask questions like, I think you should do X, but I'm not sure. So, maybe you need to ask Professor Dysart about that. So we phrased the revision plan where they can add feedback, not just feedback that they want to follow, but feedback either that they're purposefully ignoring, that was bad feedback, right? That goes against the book, and then tell me why, or ask me a question. And I go through all of them and I usually write a couple sentences, like, hey, you look like you're right on track. That was really good feedback you received. Go get them, or I'll answer questions like, hey, you got the feedback that you should do X and you weren't sure. That is good feedback. You should do this, or you definitely shouldn't do that. Don't use weather, Go back and read the book. I say never use weather.
Yes, WHETHER. That was also a good moment in my reading of the textbook. So any questions for us about like what the course entails? 10 write, review, revise cycles. You may use any of them, a few of them. All of them have the same basic structure of writing task tied to the textbook, review task tied to the textbook, and then revision plan to hold students accountable for peer feedback. Anything you'd like to know before I give you if you'd like a copy, instructions? Stephanie?
So for the revision plan, I remember last year I said most of my groups had 3 reviews, and I said something like pick the 2 most helpful and talk about how you're going to use them. But now hearing you talk, I'm thinking the students might have taken out the actual best one because they didn't necessarily recognize. So do you recommend they take a piece of each review?
Oh, so let me see if I can say back to you what the question is. You are saying that a student got feedback from Catherine Janeway and from Benjamin Sisko, and they had to build a revision plan from it, and they could only pick 2 or 3 things. Yeah. So the system is not set up to count in that way, and so I would say, like, we just say put anything you want to consider in your revision plan, especially because in this particular course, we added the thing that Tessa mentioned, where a student has received a feedback that they're not sure of or that they think is wrong, and they want to confirm that it's wrong. And the only way for you as an instructor to see that or to have a dialogue with students about feedback is to put it on the revision plan. So I think opening the revision plan to be whatever students want it to be, and then telling them in the note that they add to it, say, you know, I'm going to follow this feedback, or I'm not sure I should follow this feedback, or I am rejecting this feedback because I know I'm not supposed to use the word whether, like ever. Remove from the vocabulary. So that would be the way I would think about that.
Yeah, and Stephanie, sometimes I would, because I would look at all the feedback that they got. And I mean, I have a small class, so, you know, this makes it a lot more feasible for me to do that. And sometimes I might say too, oh, you got the feedback to do X, you should follow that feedback. But I sell this to students too, that part of what they're going to have to do as lawyers, you know, their work will be read by so many other people, and they'll be given suggested edits, and they need to figure out what are good edits and what aren't good edits, you know, to their work. And so this is kind of teaching them those skills as well. And these are, you know, this is a second and third year student class, which also probably makes some difference too, that they've had a little bit more experience writing.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to drop into the chat a copy of the slide deck so that a couple of things are available to you on your own screen and time. The first is that you can go through the slide deck and you can learn more about, if you want to use Eli Review with your students, what does it really mean for you in terms of student subscriptions? And I give you the options for students to purchase directly from us. There's still likely time for us to put an access card in your bookstore, but the days of that are short. So if bookstore is your primary method, please do that. Yeah, by tomorrow. And then if your institution is willing to pay for things, then I give you that process too. So this slide has all of that information. You can always also email me. I also, on the next slide, tell you how you can create a free account. If you had an Eli Review account before yesterday at 4 o'clock, I'm going to push a button and you're going to get the clone today. If you did not have an Eli Review account before yesterday at 4 o'clock, you need to have an account before I can give you the clone. And so as soon as you've created the account by going to app.elireview.com, and there's a big fat orange button that says new to Eli Review, sign up. And then you just follow the form. The most important piece of information is for you to use the zip code of your university's main campus. So for some of you, that's hard. And I may not be able to help you, but Google can. And so type the zip code for your main campus, and then from the drop down, select that, and then create your account. And that is going to be a key for the next step. So once you've done that account creation, you can drop your email into the same email you used for creating this Eli Review account, drop it into the chat, and I will clone the course for you. I'm going to mispronounce all these names, but Kristen Bowman, Clayton Steele, Janice Kirkland, Kate Brim, Mac McCollum, Stephanie Williams, Susan Desjarnot, Julie St. John, Tracy Norton, and Rick Shanehouse, you all have clones ready. So if you go into your Eli Review account and go to the instructor dashboard, the clone is there. The rest of you, I'm going to hang out and I will kind of create this as we go. And I see that some of you are putting this in, and so I'm going to try to do two things at once and get you your clone in a second. If you are like, I really would just rather do this with Melissa one-on-one, please do that. no, don't mess around. Don't waste your time. Just book with me. You can pick, meet with me 4 times for 15 minutes, or let's do a 60-minute. We'll get everything set up for you. Totally do that. That's in the link. So you can just book with me at your convenience, and I'll be happy to go through this step by step. If you are a person who just likes to do things all by yourself, great. I've tried to give you enough information to let you get started. Let me tell all of you about the clone before I stop the recording. The clone that you receive belongs to you. And it all comes, every single task appears as a draft, which means if your students enroll in this cloned course, they won't see 31 tasks. They're only going to see the ones you assign. So the clutter that offends you will be completely invisible to students. As you saw me do, and I was doing the click through, if you want to look at something, click on the title of the task you want to see. The student preview is normally at the bottom left. Sometimes it moves to the top left, but start at the bottom to look for that preview button. And then you get out of the preview by clicking on the ugly orange banner at the top of the green screen. And so that'll take you back. Every task is completely editable. So if you hate the words we used, you can put your own words in. You cannot upload a file. So let's say you have your lovely assignment in Microsoft Word and you've got 18 different styles. You can't put that file inside Eli Review. And when you copy paste, it's going to mark down and some of that formatting is going to go away. So if you want to replace the words that we've used, I recommend that you kind of use a stupid technology like rich text format or Notepad or something that's going to take all of your lovely Microsoft Word styles out before you try to render it on the web. You can also just link out. So maybe you use Dropbox or maybe you use Google Drive or something like that. If you have a lovely writing assignment, you can link out to it, and that will preserve your formatting. But again, if you use the course clone, we've written instructions. You can use what we have. But if you want your instructions, be aware of those kind of complexities. And if you edit it, here's another gotcha in our system. We don't have auto save. So make sure you click save at the bottom of the screen like 50 times. I cannot tell you how often it happens to me, and I do this every day. So just remember that if you're going to change the criteria, if you're going to rewrite something, save, 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 especially if you get interrupted by a barking dog or, you know, a phone call. If you delete a task, everything next is deleted too. So the beauty of Eli is that it's a connected workflow: writing, review, revise, right? The disaster is if you delete the writing task, everything is gone. Don't panic. I can get it back for you. Like we can recover it, but just so you know, like it is, the delete will take it all. So those are the big things. Maybe you want to clone your clone. So I'm giving you a copy today and you want to have this pristine clone just as Tessa and I designed this course, and you want to keep it in perpetuity. Great, you can. But you could also click clone at the top of that screen and give yourself a new copy. And that's the copy you use with students. And you can kind of monkey around with it as you see fit. So I've given you some tips if that's your strategy. And here's my big last moment of advice for everybody. Assign one thing at a time and give yourself a rhythm. This course was built on the Monday writing task is due rhythm. Tuesday, you assign groups and assign the review, and it begins Tuesday morning, and the reviews are set to be due on a Wednesday night. And then on Thursday, the revision plans are due. But if you give yourself a rhythm for this workflow and give your students a rhythm for this workflow, things have seemed to go better for most instructors. So
I'm just going to pop in and say really quick, I'm doing it on like a week. My class is on Wednesday. And so most of my assignments I'm doing with a week pattern, where I'm actually having them turn in the assignment before we discuss it in class. This is something I'm kind of playing with. So they will have done the reading, they will have potentially watched a video, they'll turn the writing assignment in, we'll talk about it in class, and then they'll do their reviews and feedback. And I'm going to see how that works again, because I'm trying to hold my students accountable for doing the reading and watching the videos that I slave over recording. So, and I'm happy, you know, if you have technical questions about Eli, you should definitely talk to Melissa and not me, but I'm happy to talk to anybody about the details of the assignments and the book. You know, if you have questions, just feel free to reach out.
And we have Eli Review users on the call, so feel free to ask them about their advice while I'm making the second set of clones. I'm sorry, like if you see me looking weird, it's because I'm creating the clones on a second screen. So questions you have about Eli Review or about this course, please ask away. There are smart people on the call who can offer their wisdom.
I would also say if you haven't done, and I don't know if you're still doing them, Melissa, the kind of intro courses to Eli Review where you basically sign in as a student. Do you guys still do those? If you haven't used Eli Review, I would encourage you to try to take one of those, because then you see what the students see and it helps you kind of understand the process more. I did that last year and I found it to be very helpful, even though I didn't want homework. It's not a lot of homework and you can make it up.
Yes, you can. So thank you for that endorsement, Tessa. I'll put the link in the chat as well, so everybody can see that. I'm actually hosting one per week in the month of August. And so there's one beginning Monday the 9th and one beginning the 16th. I skipped the week of the 23rd, which seems to be everybody's favorite first day. But then there's another one at the end of August. So I hope you can join one of those. And that is like 20 minutes a day. You put your rationale for why peer learning matters to students in the as a writing task. You get feedback from all kinds of people. This time we had biologists, we had a K-12 teacher, we had writing program administrators, we've had people from China and Russia and Singapore, like all kinds of people. You never know who's going to participate in that week, and that makes it really fun. And you go through the whole process, and at the end of the week you get instructor access as well as student access. And now let me find my place again in the list of folks that I am doing. Other questions or advice from Eli Review users?
I have a question, and I apologize if this has been covered. What is the cost to students?
It is, if they buy it directly from us, it's $19.95 for 6 months. And it is $29.95 for a year. So some of you I know teach a 2-sequence legal writing course. So the $29.95 is the price for the year-long access.
So Kristen has a great question about odd numbers in the chat. And what I did, Kristen, is I tried to have everybody have one assignment where they were in the slightly larger group and just rotate it around. That was the best that I could do. I'd be curious if other people had approaches. And then I would say life's not fair. Just kidding. I wouldn't say that, but I would think it a lot. Looks like Stephanie did the same thing with the rotating. And again, when you have a smaller class, it's a little bit easier, you know, to do that.
Okay, again, I'm going to butcher the name, so I apologize for mispronouncing everything. Lori Tomey, Jessica Garcia Brown, Heather Baxter, Elizabeth Sokol, Brooke Bowman, Shelley James. You all have courses that should populate in your instructor dashboard in Eli Review. And I have 4 copies ready to go if someone else is requesting one that I've missed. So again, I hope you have the slide deck, which has links to tutorials and support, but also do not hesitate to book with me. I can probably save you 2 hours just by helping you do the thing you care about most today, and only that thing, not everything else. So don't hesitate, book with me. I'm happy to answer your questions. The thing is that if you email me, just understand that I am one person. So slow questions come to me, and support at Eli Review gets your fast questions. So I forget where I put that on the slide, but anyway, there's a slide on here that tells you, at the very last one probably says, like, if you'd like fast support, well, support at elireview.com and send us the URL. So if you are in any screen in Eli Review, if you just copy the URL and you drop it in the email to me or to support at elireview.com, then we can go directly to where you are and see what you see. Often people will say, Melissa, I had this problem with this review. Well, my dear, you have 10 and you have 2 courses. And I don't know if you're talking about the course you're teaching this minute or the one that you teach in 2 hours. So it's really helpful to be very specific, especially to tell us which course, which task, those kind of details just help us help you faster. In the app, you can just use the report a problem, and that gives us all the information that we need directly. So it goes, every email goes to support at elireview.com, also comes to me. So I see it. There's no need to copy me on those tickets because I'm already copied. Other questions? Other ways I can help you sort of explore this course?